Hello! It's me, without a video camera once again. Yay! I'm reading a book, a little booklet thing. It is called The Economics of Non-Human Societies by Gordon Tullock. It's about 20 years old or so, but it's still an interesting read. After all, the origin of the species is 150 years old or something like that, something close, 153 years old, I don't know. That's some quick math, which I'm not good at. In Chapter 3, he's talking about the market and its relationship to ants and bees and insects. Let me see if I can find some passages to read. Chapter 3, Coordination and the Prisoner's Dilemma. This is from Chapter 3, page 26 of this particular version that I have. Quote, "If the ants do not have the large command and control structures as we observe in human society, what of the other principal way of coordinating human beings, the free market? This also seems to be almost completely missing in non-human societies. We do not observe, strictly speaking, exchanges of the market type occurring among them. There are exchanges. I have already mentioned the fact that the protozoa in the termite's gut digest the wood which the termite eats. This could be regarded as an exchange between the termite, which provides the labor of getting the wood, and the protozoa, which digests it and excrete various food chemicals which the termite itself can consume. Clearly this is an exchange, but it is far from a market exchange. Presumably, if the termite ate less food, the protozoa would digest less food and excrete less in the way of things which the termite can use as nutrition. Similarly, if the protozoa reduced the amount of chemicals that they excrete and which are digestible by the termite, this would no doubt reduce the efficiency of the termite in its wood eating. But neither of these looks very much like a market exchange, even though there may be factors which lead both to operate at some kind of optimal level. This is not, of course, the only case in which we observe different members of the cooperating species doing different things, and the effects being, in essence, exported to other members of the species. The ant that repairs part of the nest is producing a good for the other ants, and, if it is an ordinary healthy nest, will also be eating food which is brought into the nest from outside by other ants. Calling this a market exchange is, however, very difficult. In order to make this a market exchange, we would have to argue not that the individual ant is being paid by the other ants collectively for this repair, but something more direct is occurring between the two particular ants. If the ants are observed under these circumstances, it will be found that the ant that has been engaging in nest repair will encounter the ant which is coming in from the outside with food, and there will be a brief sort of ceremony in which their antennae are tapped. At the end of this, the food-bearing ant will produce from its crop some food for the nest-repairing ant, and then both will continue on their way. It could be argued that this is an exchange in which the food-bearing ant obtains the pleasure of having this particular set of antenna taps, and pays for it with the food. I think this is a very strange interpretation, but with our present knowledge, one cannot say for certain that it is untrue. In any event, granted the extremely simple nervous system the ants have, it is not at all obvious that it feels anything, which we would regard as closely analogous to pleasure or pain. At a somewhat more realistic level, some species of wasps feed their larvae, and at the time this is done, the larvae excrete a liquid which apparently the adult wasps find very attractive. Indeed, on some occasions, when the adult wasp does not have food with it, it may engage in roughly mishandling the larva in hopes of getting some of this liquid. This does indeed look like an exchange, although it should be noted that none of the ordinary market characteristics in which the whole set of exchanges are brought into equilibrium by demand and supply occurs here. In any event, It is, as far as I know, the only case of anything that we can regard as even approximating market trade in the whole of the non-human social societies. End quote. I'm a bit unsure as to how he would define the market. Having thought about it for a little bit, I think that I would define the market as the transfer of energy in the form of information, emotion, wealth, resources, finances, etc., safety, maybe, protection, anything like that. The transfer of that kind of energy, or perhaps the wealth resulting from the expenditure of energy for the benefit of one or more parties. That's the market. So if you're looking at it from that view, then there's market exchanges going on all over the place, in all kinds of settings, in all kinds of societies. Pretty much anything that is a transfer of energy from one thing to the next could be viewed as a market of some sort. Now, there are two different categories. I'm not a huge fan of categorization, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But for now, I'm going to say that there are two different categories which I would define as being part of the market. One is the exploitative market, which is the transfer of wealth for the benefit of one at the expense of another. That's the exploitative market, and this happens in insect societies all the time, when one group takes advantage of another group. This occurs not only in insect societies, but in plant societies, in human societies, all the time. Imperialism is an exploitative market, where one group of powerful people impose themselves on a group of less powerful people and extract wealth unfairly or at the point of a gun. That is an exploitative market. Japanese hornets. There's a nice video somewhere I think it's on YouTube, could be anywhere. Japanese hornets attacked a honeybee nest in an effort to get it was either the honey or the larva that they were after. I can't exactly remember at this point, but they decimated the honeybee population, killed pretty much every single bee. That is an exploitative market, because they massacred the entire nest in an effort to get at what they wanted. The Dutch East India Trading Company massacred natives on the East Indies in an effort to extract the wealth in the form of spices. Perhaps even our relationship that we have with pigs and cows might be considered an exploitative relationship. But again, I said that there are gradients of these kinds of relationships. Not everything can be categorized according to strict placements. You can't just throw things in one category and say that's that and that's final. Things are gradients. Fleas. Fleas engage in an exploitative relationship with their host, sucking the blood, sometimes to the point of making their host sick. Those are exploitative markets. The other kind of market is the free, or I like to call it the symbiotic market, which is the voluntary exchange, not necessarily just the transfer, but the voluntary exchange of wealth for the benefit of both parties. So in this case, you could look at the exchange between the honeybee and the flower as being a free or symbiotic market exchange. Both are benefiting, both voluntarily engage in this market exchange. The plants do it because they get pollinated. which allows them to reproduce. The bees do it because they get nectar, which allows them to reproduce in a way. And it does. It provides food. I think the honey is food for the larva, if I'm remembering correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. But that's how I would define the market. Two different types of markets. I don't like categorization. I like to look at things as a gradient, because most of the time things are gradients. Strict categories very rarely exist in nature, in reality, in truth. We as humans, we tend to like to put things in nice little boxes and categorize them, and it makes things easier to remember. Sometimes. But for me, it makes things harder to remember because I don't look at things like that. I don't look at things as being in strict categories. I look at things as gradients. For example, this is just one example, the electromagnetic spectrum. We have it separated into radio waves, microwaves, infrared rays, rays, whatever, visible light, ultraviolet, X-ray, gamma ray. In truth, they're one. It's all the same, but we just have made these arbitrary separations based on what we discovered first. There's no difference between any of them. The only quote-unquote difference that we should be concerned about at all as humans is what I call extra visible light and subvisible light, and then visible light. What we can see, what is quote-unquote larger than what we can see, radio waves, infrared, etc., and what is smaller or subvisible light, which is X-rays, gamma rays, ultraviolet. But in reality, there's really no difference, relatively speaking, if we traveled at a certain speed in the same direction of an X-ray. We would get to a certain speed and be able to see the X-ray. It would become visible light, and it would genuinely be visible light if we were traveling at a certain speed. It would not be an X-ray anymore. And so how can we classify things like this? It's weird. I don't know. But I've droned on enough. And that's pretty much all I want to say. I didn't actually mean to... I'll talk about that electromagnetic wave thing later on, because it's absolutely fascinating to me. Relativity, length contraction, all that stuff. Absolutely fascinating. And I could talk about it for a long time. But I'll save it for another time. So, grazie, peace out.